Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. I'm author and Ghostorian Mike Ricksecker, coming to you from the new studio setup, which is not complete yet. I know I kind of promised it last week. It got a black backdrop. It's better than just looking at the wall, right? So those that are on the Patreon page, patreon.com/haunted-road-media, you will see some of that new studio setup. We'll be adding to it here very soon and get some of our favorite items back up, like Ichabod Cranium and Ghosty. Of course, we'll have the Haunted Road Roast coffee out, all that great stuff. So all those things will be getting worked back in here very soon. But tonight we're going to be talking about paranormal storytelling. Many different ways that we can talk about the paranormal and supernatural and present this different phenomenon to you. Being a writer, this is kind of pretty much one of the things I do, right? So we just had Howie Noel on, who does the Paranormal comics as well as many other different things. And that is, one method to, take a graphic novel, a comic strip, present an artwork, a storyline, and, he deals with really things that people are, I guess, afraid of over the years. He does involve paranormal teams with that, and it's interesting. So he has this tough girl that basically comes in as almost like the paranormal warrior and deals with this phenomenon. So yes, welcome back, friends and family down in the chat. Absolutely. So I have a stack of books. We'll get into a number of different things here. So I have, over the course of, I guess my life, because I've been writing since I was 7 years old, presented the paranormal in a number of different ways. So a lot of times when I'm at an event, convention, when I'm doing an interview and what have you, I'll get asked, what type of writing it is. A lot of times is it fiction, nonfiction? What type of ghost stories do you tell? And it's like, well, it really depends on the book. So, just right off the top, A Walk in the Shadows, which is the latest book, this is really more of a research book. And I did put the link down in the description. Of course, you can get everything from MikeRicksecker.com or Amazon or whatever, but this is more of a research book where we go into a lot of theory behind the phenomenon. So I do include people's experiences, things that have happened to me, things that happen to others, and then we examine those different things. So while others may do this in regards to different people that we've had on the show, like a great example here recently, Freddie Silva, a lot of his research books, he goes around the world. He researches, different phenomenon. He researches the history. He will include examples of stories that people have told him, but it has to do with lost civilizations and things like that, where this one happens to be shadow person phenomenon. And, I really do appreciate all the, stories and experiences people have provided, because I'm not the only person in the world that has had shadow people experiences. So it allows a person to take a topic, this is, paranormal, supernatural related, and just really dive into it and, really get at the heart of a specific type of phenomena. So that is really one type of way to present the paranormal and the supernatural. Storytelling, yes, in the fact that there are many stories within A Walk in the Shadows, and then we examine each type of phenomena within that. So, whether it's a specific type of shadow person, like humanoid figure, hat man, crawler, what have you, and then we get into, experiences with sleep paralysis. And so we have examples of stories from people that have had sleep paralysis, shadow person experiences in a variety of different capacities. as well as some other kind of esoteric things like shadow people out in the woods, or even like simulated universe type scenarios and things like that. So we get into a lot of different types of stories and experiences within that book, but it's more of a research book. So if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, by all means, throw them down in the chat. I actually have to bring up my little window to receive those questions from Quarantine Ghosts. I'm not exactly on the ball here. All right. All right, so there we go. So that's the research book. Prior to that, probably the more... Been a long night of talking. Christopher Stan says, love that book, have it in my collection. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So prior to that, probably the more kind of quote unquote hardcore type of paranormal books that I've written. So, I mean, this was, a lot of information, kind of more serious in nature. And those would be something like your historic paranormal books. So Ghosts of Maryland, Ghosts and Legends of Oklahoma. Of course, again, I'm not the only person that's written books like this, but you see these types of books from people from, you see this a lot in like local gift shops, or a local historic location that they'll have all these wonderful history books, and then they'll have like the ghost book about that specific location. And so that's kind of what these are, except, they're specific to a state, Maryland and Oklahoma. And so they go a lot into the history of the different locations, and then they include all of the, hauntings of that particular location, depending on the location that, we're talking about within that chapter. So what was really cool about Ghosts of Maryland is that LSU actually included as part of their Civil War review, because there's so much Civil War history in there. Not to mean that it's bogged down with history, but I have a presentation that I give that's called History and the Paranormal: A Working Relationship, which is based off of an article I wrote years ago. And basically how paranormal, hauntings, ghost stories, all of that type of stuff can't exist without the history, since, really, these people are the past, right? These are people whose lives have already played out, but we're learning more about them. And we're actually, as a writer, as paranormal investigators, we are giving a voice to those spirits from the past, so that they are no longer forgotten. They are now being remembered. A couple of questions already in from Sharon Lane. Mike, have you ever worked on a script writing of a paranormal film? And what do you prefer to write, fiction or nonfiction? Good questions. No, I haven't worked on script writing for a paranormal film. Mostly because, writing a manuscript for a book and writing a screenplay are very different styles of writing. You also have to keep in mind with a screenplay, it's not just the story that you're putting together, you're also taking into consideration all the filming elements. So, like a specific camera angle or characters walking in from a particular side of the screen and things like that. There's, I guess the setting that they put in place is, that would be kind of like describing a location, but it's a very different style of writing. The formatting is very different. And I just haven't done that. So I would, of course, be open to working on a project like that. I think, obviously, I have a lot of great ideas. I just haven't ever done that style of writing. Just different. So the other question, do you prefer fiction or nonfiction? I like both. I started my writing started off as fiction. So my very first book actually was a mystery novel, Deadly Airs. The sequel is System of the Dead. When I started writing as a 7-year-old, I started writing when I was 7 years old. I've been writing ever since. I really liked the Encyclopedia Brown books, solving these little short mystery stories. And as a kid, I wanted to mimic those types of stories. This is actually part of a conversation that we had with Howie Noel prior to the show that we had with him, where we were talking about being influenced by writers or types of books, but not just straight ripping it, because that was part of the conversation where he's had a lot of his work copied, or they've tried to take the Paranormal name or something like that, and you can't do that. But especially as a kid, you are influenced by different writers and different books and things like that, and so you try to mimic that, but you make it your own. So with me, as a 7-year-old, I was trying to mimic the Encyclopedia Brown books, and I came up with little mystery stories that were, either me or a character that I had in that same vein, but it was still all my own. I also wrote a little historic fiction, and I did write some ghost stories. So yeah, my roots are fiction, but I have a passion for history, and I have a passion for finding out the truth. And with the paranormal, you're talking about supernatural activity, you are talking about spirituality, all interests of mine. So how are all these different things related? How have I been affected over the years by this type of phenomena? How have others been affected by this type of phenomena? How can we help each other? What are some things that we can learn? How do things tie into the origins of the planet, of the universe? Are there things that we can learn about who we are as humans by researching deeper into these topics? What has been lost to time that we should know now, so that we're not making the same mistakes as humans? Because we do that perpetually. We're kind of always in a cycle that we're going along as a species. We make a mistake, we get hurt, we move on. We fix it, right? We move on, we learn from it. A couple generations down the road, they have forgotten about how we got hurt before, and they make the same damn mistake again. I feel like we're doing that now in our society. Like, we made some mistakes, we fixed it, we moved along, things were okay for a while, and then we made the same mistakes again. It's falling apart. In a lot of different ways. I'm not just picking one specific social issue right now. There's many different social issues going on right now, in many capacities. And people tend to focus on one or two. There's a lot. So I do like nonfiction in that it kind of does go back to mysteries that we are. There's still mysteries out there about the universe to be found, to be discovered, and that's where the nonfiction writing comes in. That as I'm researching about one particular thing, I find out information about other stuff, and so that really happened in A Walk in the Shadows. Really, a lot of this came together in like the last 6 months of 2019. I've been working on the book for a couple of years, but it was kind of like a steamroll effect. So as I was doing research for specific chapters within that book, I started finding more information and finding more information and finding more information, and it just became extremely interesting what I was discovering. And it was just like a whole snowball effect that, I'm finding all this additional material, and boom, put it in. And it has become so much more so now that this book here, and I allude to it at the very end, the Not So Final Thoughts chapter, that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. In the introduction, I make mention that this book will be continuously updated with more information, things that we discover specifically on shadow people. But I mentioned the shadow dimension in the not so final thoughts of that book. I'm really talking about the connected universe, which we've talked a lot about here on Beyond the Shadows. And so with all that information I discovered there, taking that along with more information that I've been discovering here since I published that book, and I'm really excited about the project. There is so much more that's coming to fruition here with this bigger Shadow Dimension Connected Universe project. There was a video project that I had lined up to go along with that as well, which COVID kind of nixed, at least for this year. So I hope to bring that next year that I think everybody will really, really enjoy. So be on the lookout for that as well. So I hope that answered the question, right? All right. So speaking of these Deadly Airs and System of the Dead, and also going back to what we were discussing with Howie Noel earlier in the graphic novels, in that type of storytelling device. So a few years ago, some of you may remember a project that I started working on with Adam Tillery. And I did have to shelve that for a while. That basically it's been put on pause indefinitely just because I've had so many other things going on. And that was a Time Channeler Chronicles. Now, this was another a different method of paranormal storytelling in that it really was like a graphic web series. Because I had Adam doing the illustrations. He made some fantastic illustrations for this project, and I felt really bad having to put it on hiatus for now. So Adam, you might be lurking out there. You did some fantastic work for this. I'm sorry, my friend, that we didn't keep it going. It was really because I was trying to bite off a little bit more than I could chew with everything else I had going on at the same time too. Because what we were doing this like graphic web series. Also, in conjunction, I was making a audio and visual version of this on YouTube. So I was taking his artwork and basically reading the story that I had written, dubbed over it, to go ahead and place on YouTube. And I know you're probably like, well, if you're just reading it, how hard can it be to toss up the illustrations as well? It's like, well, yeah, but you kind of don't understand that you have to do some sort of animation with this, and the story is actually several minutes long. So you're working with like 3 or 4 illustrations, and you're coming at it from like different angles that are moving in, zooming out, or coming from the top down or bottom up, and so it was a lot of manipulation just to make the video, when really, I guess probably what I should have just concentrated on was, I'm writing the story, he's doing the art, just do the web series. But I was trying to incorporate these videos with it as well. So there's Adam, no worries at all, take your time. But he did some fantastic artwork with this I do want to share. So so here's my detective character, Chase Michael DeBarlo, which is in the books Deadly Airs and System of the Dead. He's the guy. But he has, kind of like me, because it is really my alter ego, some abilities that he doesn't admit to having. There is a third Chase Michael DeBarlo book that's in the middle of being written, where he's hired by a paranormal investigative team, and he has a journey learning that, at the beginning, basically he doesn't believe really in the paranormal. And over his journey, of course, he learns that the activity does exist, and he may even have, some mild abilities. So this is kind of at the beginning of that. The room is modeled after the Stone Lion Inn, Guthrie, Oklahoma, which is great. Adam did a fantastic job with this. Really, really amazing. And so here's some of the others. Claire is trying to help heal one of the girls that got hurt. She's a very young psychic medium. And then Cornelius Bones with Elise is the female, basically time channeler who DeBarlo is going to train in this very esoteric field. So I really like the premise of where I wanted to take this, and Adam was providing some wonderful artwork. And I hope one of these days we can pick back up on it. We had 4 episodes? And I know quite a few people were actually reading it and were enjoying the story. So hopefully we can get to it again. But it's another method of storytelling where you have the story, you have the artwork. Again, doing some different videos and exploring. This was exploring not just supernatural and paranormal activity. We're also exploring legends and lore, cryptids, because we had there were vampire type creatures that were in here. Exploring time travel. So you're talking about a lot of interdimensional concepts and theories. So this fictional series was exploring a lot of supernatural and science fiction even type of concepts. That was going to be really, really fun. So and everybody's loving Adam's illustrations. So Adam's an amazing artist, and that's just a few. He did a lot of great artwork. TimeTraveler.com still exists. It's still out there. Of course, I haven't updated the site in a few years because I haven't posted any new stories, but you can check out the stories and the artwork out there. TimeChandler.com. So that's another way of telling paranormal stories. Some others. So if we go back to, because I've kind of gone back and forth here between fiction and nonfiction. Actually, there's a couple more questions coming in here. So from Betty Lange, Grand Old Folks, Mike, are you going to do one on triangles, ley lines, and portals? So, okay. Great question. Yes, and yes. So as part of the connected universe, right? All of those things, triangles, ley lines, portals, all of that part of the connected universe. Also, I have to do something on Alaska Triangle. And so that's in both of those. Well, I'm probably more along with Shadow Dimension stuff right now. But they're both in the preliminary research stages where I'm gathering information. I do want to get out the Alaska Triangle stuff here if I could within the next year. I really would have to push hard on that. But right now, I think the iron is, obviously the iron is hot for that. We just had the television show. Everybody keeps asking, is there going to be a second season? Right now, that's completely up in the air, of course, because, I don't even know if the producers are even talking with the network on that. Just everybody keeps asking about it. But even if they were, COVID would have put a nix on that for now. So we don't even know. So there's this hiatus where just nobody knows what's going on. So the iron would be hot for that. And it would tie into all the other research that I'm doing right now for Shadow Dimension, the Connected Universe, and all that stuff. So it's a piece of that. And so I'd like to get that together, put that out first, and then continue on with the rest and get that out. So you're looking at Alaska Triangle potentially 2021 and Shadow Dimension, Connected Universe stuff 2022. It's kind of where I have it in my head right now. Hopefully we can make all that happen. So Sharon Lane, Mike, how do you get in the mood to write? Do you write late at night? Do you have a wave of thoughts coming in and you marathon it? I have always wanted to have some sort of set routine, and right now it is essentially just whenever I can do it. Um, I do work a day job, which significantly gets in the way, because that's basically 9 hours of my day. It's 8-hour workday, an hour for lunch. When I have to commute, that adds another hour to an hour and a half, depending on traffic. So you're talking 10 hours of my day right there to a job. What I here with each of these two books here, you'll notice that Encounters with the Paranormal books, because those on the podcast can't see, right? So you'll notice in the acknowledgments, I put the crew at Zoop and Rocky River for the nourishment at lunch while putting this book together. So during my lunch break, I will try to do as much Haunted Road Media stuff as I can. So I was going to a restaurant. Basically, it's a soup and salad place called Zoop. And I'd have to drive there and back, so I would lose that time. But there was at least like a half-hour block in there where I could work on Haunted Road Media stuff. So I tried to get it in as much as I can. Same thing with Deadly Airs, my first book. Basically, my lunch hour, I was writing on it. And then my kids basically going to bed at 9 o'clock, and then whatever I could do after that, if I could, because there's always like household stuff that, especially then with kids being little, that I would have to do. So it's just like whenever I can, like right now I'm doing a show, so obviously I'm not writing. Tuesdays I really have almost no time to do anything but prepare for Edge of the Rabbit Hole and Beyond the Shadows. So it's really just, if I have some time tomorrow, I will. If I have some time Thursday, I will. But I can't tell you when during the day it would be. So yes, there are times I marathon it. Example, I literally, I just put it down here, didn't I? I literally, for Ghosts and Legends of Oklahoma, locked myself in a bedroom for a month. I would come home from work. I was living in Oklahoma because I was trying to meet a deadline. With Schiffer, you set a deadline. If you're able to get it in by then, you'll be able to meet the publishing cycle for whatever time period that is. If you miss that deadline, it's not going to be till the next publishing cycle, which is going to be at least another 6 months off. So that's, with Haunted Road Media, I try to get stuff out as quickly as I can. Hopefully, maybe it's just a few months or whatever. But when it comes to the actual publishing world, when I say the next publishing cycle pushed out 6 months, you have to understand that the whole process after I submit the book to the publisher is almost a year, okay? Because they do whatever they're doing on their end. They're dealing with many writers, a lot of books, all that stuff. When you're publishing, I guess not Haunted Road Media or not, if you're not self-publishing, you're in a queue. Actually, Haunted Road Media is growing where we have a queue. And so, yeah, it's like almost a year from the day you submit to the book actually being published. So I was trying to meet a deadline with this. Trying to make a long story short, too late. And so I locked myself in a room for a month, come home from work, make dinner for the kids and ex-wife. Won't go there. And then I basically put myself in the room to finish that book. And I got it. I got it out there. So I do have marathons sometimes. Writing late at night, to answer that question, I hit a wall at some point. I know I'm usually up pretty late, but I hit a wall at a point where I can't think like that anymore. I can do a bunch of other things. Like I could physically do different things. I could work maybe on editing video or scheduling multimedia posts or I don't know, doing dishes or whatever, cleaning up something around the house. I could do more like physical type stuff, but there's a part of the creative brain that turns off at a certain time that's just like, I can't. So hope that answers those questions. All right. So I threw up the Encounters with the Paranormal books. Again, another different type of telling paranormal stories. So these are basically true encounters from people from all over. These are not seasoned writers. Yes, I'm one of the writers. I have a few stories in there. There are a couple other people in there that are writers. But most of the stories in here are from people that are not professionals. They are just people who have had haunted experiences and were willing to share their story. So, true stories. And I guess first-person point of view. Some of them are at historic locations. Some happen when people were young, small kids. Some happened overseas. They're all over different types of experiences. And that's what I was going for with these when I started putting these together is, I could share all the paranormal experiences that I've had, but you may not be able to relate to anything that's happened to me. You get enough people together and there's a much better opportunity or much better chance that you would be able to relate to something, that a large group of people have experienced. So that was a big thing here, so that connotation that we have as people who have had paranormal experiences is that we're crazy. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about writing what I do and about doing the videos, which is another way to tell a paranormal story, by the way, is through all the videos, is that so many people have come to me and said, thank you for sharing these things. You've helped me realize that I'm not crazy. And, we're not. I mean, there are a couple people who are. But that happens with any medium, right? With any type of industry, there's always your crazies out there. But most of us who have a sane mind, of course, well, we're not crazy, but we've seen ghosts. We've had weird things happen to us. We've seen shadow people. We've seen these crazy balls of light. We've seen fairies. Whatever it is, these things have happened. And while you as an individual might question your individual experience, once you start realizing that other people are out there that have had the same experience, you realize, okay, what I saw, what I heard, what I smelled, whatever, is legit. It really happened. I'm not crazy after all. And that's very, very helpful to have that type of affirmation. And I talk about it, in some of my kind of origin stories. The shadow person at the house when I was 13 years old, when my mother said that she had seen it too, it helped me that, okay, I really am seeing this. I'm okay. My eyes aren't going crazy, which for me, I have actually very bad eyesight. I'm wearing contacts. I have terrible eyesight. And so for me, that would be a concern. Are my eyes finally getting to the point where, they're just, I'm going to go blind or something. I don't know. So she affirmed that, no, I was seeing this thing. And she did it in such a fashion that, oh yeah, like no big deal. Like, yeah, it happened. It was there. That I felt good about it. That, I didn't get scared by her affirming that this was happening. And I became playful with it. I would see it. I called it Tom. Like, hey, Tom, how's it going? So that's what I've been going for with these Encounters books. So, Robert Hanna says, I'm wearing my Beyond the Shadow shirt right now. Love both my shirts. Thanks, Robert. Absolutely appreciate that. From Betty Lange, Grand Old Folks. Mike, do you copyright your titles before you publish the book? Yeah. So, I do that. Now, there's a I guess here's the deal. So if something should happen where you go to court, having the certificate that you have copywritten the book significantly helps. But just the fact that like if you just printed a book with all the stuff in it and you've slapped copyright on there, you basically have a way to prove, should it ever go to court, that yes, you did publish something, before this other person tried to lay claim to it. So you would have a case anyway. But filing it with the Copyright Office and getting that little certificate, that does help. So I keep that stuff on file with Haunted Road Media. From Victoria Monday, do you feel that nonfiction books write faster than fiction? It's easier to retell a story than to create a story. That's a good question, and it depends. Yeah, sometimes it's easier to just take a memory and write it down, if that's what your nonfiction book is about. You take something like A Walk in the Shadows. It's not just me recounting my experiences, and it's not just other people recounting their experiences. There's a lot of... I had to do medical research on this for sleep paralysis. There's some historic research that was done here on like ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia. It's not hardcore in this particular book, but there's going to be more of that in the Shadow Dimension book. So there's, I had to do research when I got into Shadows in the Matrix, which is about the simulated universe. I had to do research on those type of concepts of what a simulated universe would look like and why certain people have those theories out there. So that's not easy stuff. You have to dig for that, for one. So there's a lot of reading involved, and depending on the angle that you're taking, of course, I'm using some quotes from these different researchers. So I'm grabbing these quotes to try to prove a point in a concept that I have. And so you're doing a lot of, basically arranging thoughts and really trying to think through these different concepts. And you're developing your own theories and in your own philosophy on how the universe works, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. That said, with fiction, sometimes, there have been times that I've, blasted through parts of Deadly Airs and System of the Dead, and it was just like, oh, I got it, boom, 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 and you could see it. Howie Noel mentioned it on his interview that, he basically sees like a movie in his mind, and he's trying to get that movie, onto pen and paper for us. And that, in a lot of cases with my fiction writing, is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing like a movie in my head, and I'll have a scene, and boom, 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 boom. I write it out, and I see this, boom, 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 boom. There are other times people talk about writer's block, and you get to a point like, I don't know how to transition from here to there. What do I want him to say? How do I want him to get there? Do I want somebody to interact with it? How do we move from here to there? The way I kind of circumvent that for writers who get stuck in writer's block, because I know I'm going to get there, I will go ahead and go there and write that scene out. And hopefully by the time I get there, I will have figured out that in-between spot and do that. If not, then I move on to another area. I always have a part that I can write. I never become completely blocked. So eventually I get back to that part that I couldn't figure out before. So, But that's a really good question. All right, Robert Hanna, what do you think about Stephen King wanting to write a book about Jason Voorhees? Why not? You would think Stephen King probably has similar enough characters by now. I mean, if he wants to, I guess if he has all the permission in place to go ahead and do so and, continue on with somebody else's creation. That's kind of what they do for, like the Star Wars novels, right? They commission these guys to, write a book in the Star Wars universe, and they give them, I guess, some license, or some creative license to be able to manipulate that world, and of course allow them to use the characters and what have you. So, I mean, from a legal standpoint, I mean, they just, dot the I's and cross the T's the right way. Stephen King would have a interesting take on it, I believe. We'll see what he does with it. Betty Lange, do you use an outline or storyboard? Sometimes. What I end up doing, this is mostly true for the fiction writing. I'll just start going. I have an idea. I want to run with it. And so I'm going. But at some point, you've already written so much that you're like, okay, what did I write? It gets to that point. What did I write? Because you want to make sure, especially with something like mystery writing, where you have a lot of details that are important. Something like mystery is very plot driven. I say that. Let me back up a second there with that. So it was something like mystery. It is very plot driven because you're trying to basically figure out who done it. However, you need strong characters too. The story needs to be character centric while it's still very plot driven, which is a challenge because people, and I think this is where some, I'm going to take the show Lost. The first couple seasons of Lost were very character driven. You wanted to know more about these characters, how the characters were connected. You want to know more about their lives. They did a fantastic job with that. While there's all this crazy mystery stuff that was going on with the island. And I loved all that mystery stuff. I was always like, I want to know more about the island. Let's get into the mysteries and find all the stuff that's going on with there, which is what John Locke's character always did. He was the one that was like, let's follow John because he's going to try to find out what the hell's going on with the island. The last couple seasons of Lost, because they were trying to wrap up all of those, storylines at least as much as they could, because they left a lot of things on the table. They became too plot driven and forgot about the character development. And those last couple seasons, you're like, especially the last one, because they were just, it was like plot, and they were like throwing things out there that, like the lighthouse. Why did we never find this lighthouse before? Well, maybe because we weren't looking for it. And they basically just like threw this lighthouse in there to like help drive the plot, to wrap up a couple things from, earlier seasons. So you have to be very, very careful with that balance. People relate to the characters, but get intrigued by the mystery, and that's the plot. So it's an interesting balance to have to play with. So all right. So some of the other methods here that I had. So these two books here, Campfire Tales Midwest and Ghostorian Case Files, they are very similar yet very different books. So they're very similar in the fact that they both contain fictional tales based on real history and legends. Another way to tell a story. So Campfire Tales, you think of you're sitting by the campfire with a bunch of friends and you're telling, creepy ghost stories. In fact, that's exactly what they're doing in the very first story of this book. Some of my, actually the best short story I've ever written is in this book, Feeling the Afterlife. what was I going to say? Oh my gosh. It's been a long week. So, fictional tales based on real history and legends. It's fun, but very different than something like Ghostorian Case Files, in a lot of different ways. So while these are fun ghost stories, you're roasting marshmallows by the campfire, kids doing goofy stuff, or they're getting eaten by the thing in the lake, and I've made a point to make sure that you learn something about the locations that I describe in these books. So they're all real locations. The thing in the lake, that's Sin Killer Lake. Feeling the Afterlife was the old Fort Chaffee Field Medical Complex. I do the Gateway to Hell in Stull, Kansas. A lot of that stuff. So I make sure you learn something while you're going through this. Every story contains fire, by the way. But they're fictional tales. Same thing with Ghostorian Case Files. You're still fictional tales. You're still learning about some historic location, but the writing is extremely different. It almost couldn't be any farther from Campfire Tales. Fun, playful stories for the most part. This is written like you just opened up my file cabinet and started leafing through the case notes. So there's journal entries and email transcripts and interview transcripts and all these different types of things like that. There are journal entries. The journal entries are probably the closest thing that come to a first person point of view writer saying, I did this and I went there and I did that. There's even just excerpts from ancient texts that are pertinent to the actual story, that give you a little bit of insight as to what's going on within the case at hand. So very, very different style of writing. But again, they're fictional tales based on real history and legends, which is exactly what this is. But yet, they're both written very differently. So again, different ways to share paranormal stories. And thank you, Quarantine Ghost, for putting all those links down there. Absolutely appreciate it. So, okay, Tom McNicholas, how do you write and not keep repeating yourself? That's a challenge because, even while doing these shows like this, how do I, keep doing shows after show after show without repeating myself? You try to find new angles and ways to view things. So, how many times have I talked about shadow people, right? How many times can I sit here and say, this is what a humanoid figure is, this is what a hat person is, but yet we've done many, many shows here, Beyond the Shadows or on the Haunted Road Media channel, about shadow people. What I try to do with each one is take a different look at it, take a different angle. So while, take the water bottle that I'm holding here, it's always going to be the water bottle, right? But yet if I put a camera here, it's going to look differently than if I put a camera back here, or if I put a camera down here. You're going to see a different side of the bottle. You see this, text on the back. Over here is the front. From right here, you would get like the lid. It would all look very differently. And maybe that's a little simplistic, but with anything in life, there are many, many different ways to look and examine at things. And so while a particular subject in and of itself may be the same topic, there are a lot of different ways in which to actually look at it. And so when I start getting deeper into shadow dimension, connected universe, while there's going to be a lot of because we'll be talking about interdimensional beings and shadow people, while there's going to be a lot of elements that are from this book, A Walk in the Shadows, it's not going to be a straight rip of A Walk in the Shadows with extra information. It's going to be a very, I won't necessarily say different look. It's going to look at a broader spectrum of this type of phenomena and will incorporate some of the concepts that we explored in A Walk in the Shadows. So that would be, I guess that's a way to look at it, since we were talking about like cameras there for a second, looking at different angles. It would be like taking this book and using like a wide angle lens and taking a look at a much broader spectrum of that type of world. So it's a good question. So let's see. Victoria Monday. Mike, I've noticed that those of us who wear glasses or contacts seem to see differently. We see intuitively, creatively. Do you think that when a vision path is blocked one way, it opens another way? I don't know. That's a good question, because there are good writers out there that don't wear glasses. So I know that there's always that, and it's very, very true that like people who can't see very well are able to hear better and things like that. I can't really confirm that. I would have to actually like almost like take a poll, like how many of our great writers out there wear glasses and how many don't. Like my dad, he does wear glasses now, but he's gotten older in age. When he was younger, like he wore some glasses for reading, is essentially what he wears them for. And he works on the computer now that his eyes have aged, but he didn't need them before. He's a very different creative person than I. Like his area of expertise is not in creative writing. His is in machining and woodwork. So he's a tool and die maker by trade, builds machines. He does a lot of CAD work, or at least did. He still does when he's working on a project. Builds his own furniture. Basically designed and built the last two houses that my parents have lived in. But, he had glasses for reading. He's extremely creative. So I can't necessarily say that one. But I get what you're trying to say with a vision path is blocked, and so something else opens up. I think that's true in like a physical sense. Like you might have better hearing or something like that. Like people who are blind are able to hear many more things that are going on around them than somebody who's able to see. It's different though. Alina the fam. When you were writing A Walk in the Shadows, how did you keep the different experiences of everyone that shared organized before incorporating it into the book? It's a great question. So some of the experiences I already had from other books, like the Encounters with the Paranormal books, like Sean Gilmore's Shadow Person experience was already in this book, so I already knew I wanted to use that. I'll tell you what, things really fell into place with A Walk in the Shadows. So I had different topics that I was writing about that I knew I needed to cover, that I was in the middle of writing about. And I didn't have experiences or stories for them. And it's like, okay, so I don't have an experience or a story about it. I know it's true. So I'm just going to go ahead and write about it, and we'll get into the theories, and we'll approach it that way. That we're theorizing about this specific topic. And this happened a lot with the sleep paralysis stuff. So talking with people at conventions, or because I was talking about the book here on the channel, or on the Haunted Road Media channel, or people would watch one of the Shadow People videos on the Haunted Road Media channel, and they'd write me or contact me or talk to me at the convention or whatever. Hey, it's really interesting what you're talking about. I had this experience. And lo and behold, that experience was something that I needed to help flesh out that chapter that I didn't have anything for. I think that's kind of like the universe putting people into your life that, that you need, that, will kind of help out. And so, yeah, it was just one of those moments of synchronicity. So I already had an idea of what I wanted to write about, the type of topics. And then, while I had a lot of it from some of my experiences, some are from experience, or some were experiences from people I'd been talking to for years that I knew they had those experiences. Some were in previous books, and then others, just, it was like they came out of the woodwork. Or, okay, Tom McNicholas is down in the chat. The topic on human spirits as shadow people. There's 5 of us that experienced the little girl that was up there. Many of them didn't see the black smoke turn into the little girl. I saw the black smoke turn into the girl. They still saw the girl. But it's like I'm writing the book and all of a sudden the phenomenon happens right in front of me. And that was one that I always was skeptical about, for many years. But I had enough people like Rob Guttrow, who also speaks to that in this book, that were saying, well, no, some of them are. Some of these shadow people are actually humans. And I was like, for a long time. Over the years, I was like, okay, I guess I can buy it. Rob talked about it. Others over the years that I talked to had mentioned it. Yeah, it was, a relative or, somebody else that, that I knew or is known to haunt there and is actually a human, but they show up as a shadow. It's like, okay, fine. But then it actually happened to me, and it's like, okay, that just like solidified the whole chapter right there. So, yeah, it's amazing when things like that happen. From Babs Bunny, Mike, do you ever not believe people's ghost stories? What makes a story too fantastical to believe? That is a great question. It's I guess it's intuition. There is a part of, when you're having a conversation with anyone. I guess just look at it this way. It might not be anything to do with ghosts. It could be just something totally mundane in life. And somebody strings you a story, and you're like, this person's bullshitting me. And you just know. It could be something about, I don't know, the dish that broke in the kitchen, and your kid is lying about it, or, the mechanic that you took the car to is trying to get you to, invest more money into the car, and you're like, no, there's something wrong there. You kind of know, you have an intuition. So yeah, I hear stories from a lot of people all the time, whether it's at a convention or they email me or, whatever it is. And yeah, it's kind of an intuition thing of, this person, okay, I buy that one. And this other one, like, yeah, that's a crock. It's just, yeah. You just kind of know, and I don't know how else to explain that. I also, people that are, very good friends of mine that I've known for many, many years. Yeah, I have a trust level with some people that I just know this person's not going to BS me about that. What did Victoria say? We need a Ghostorian Case Files board game. That would be interesting. I have made board games before. It's been many, many years. But when I was much younger, I made board games. It was something my sister and I did when we were kids, and there was one that I made as an adult. But it was a Monopoly parody that was a family joke. But it was a lot of fun to make. There's a family joke that came about one Thanksgiving, and so for Christmas I made everybody a board game associated on that joke. That was a long holiday season. I was up like 3:30 in the morning every single day to get that thing made for everybody. I mean, I had like little wooden pieces that I painted and all kinds of stuff. So it was kind of crazy. Is there anything else I want to mention to you guys before we close this up? It seems like in my mind there was something else that I wanted to mention real quick that I didn't, because we had a bunch of great questions come in. I think that it might be it, right? So we talked about, I'm trying to think here. We talked about the Encounter series, the mysteries, A Walk in the Shadows quite a bit. The Encounter series, Ghosts of Maryland. Oh, yeah, that's right, the videos. We've been talking all this about books, right? I know the thumbnail for this YouTube video is books, but another way to tell paranormal stories is through video. And we have done a lot of that. So on the Haunted Road Media channel, I know this is the Edge of the Rabbit Hole channel that this is airing live on right now, but the Haunted Road Media channel, which is our parent channel where most of our content is almost 800 videos now? Is it that high? Is it almost 700, 800? It's a lot. And there is a lot of storytelling on those videos, whether it's our paranormal investigations, Friday Night Ghost Frights. There's what I call learning videos, like the Tulpa video that I just put out a few weeks ago is what I would call a Haunted Road Media learning video. We've done like Paranormal Roads, so like road trip videos, a lot of different stuff. We used to do the Mike Morning mugs out there. Hey, just here for the coffee, Mike's Morning mug, the shirt. So there's a lot of different things that we've done out there to tell a paranormal story. And, there's like just straight up like haunted history type videos, like the Alton video from a couple years ago, which got into, that one was really interesting because it got into like the connections around the town of the history, the reported ghost stories in the newspapers, and how some of these were very interconnected. There was a much bigger project of that I was working on before all the COVID stuff. Actually, it's been a 2-year project that has been repeatedly hammered. So last year was all the flooding. I couldn't work on it except for like maybe this much because of all the flooding last year. So come into this year, gonna get that finished up and really put something out on it. COVID happens. So it'll eventually happen. But so those videos are another way to tell that story. And there's when it comes to A Walk in the Shadows, there's another big video project that I was in the very preliminary stages of working on in relation to that before, again, all the COVID stuff happened. So hopefully those things will, as the reins loosen up here a little bit more, we'll be able to follow up and do some more of those things here soon. So, and even like this, another way to tell the paranormal stories. So as we do these videos here, I share personal experiences. I share a lot of information about different types of supernatural activity. Beyond the shadows, we're talking about all kinds of esoteric things. So it's another way to tell that story. This ends up as a podcast on, Spotify. The Edge of the Rabbit Hole also ends up on iHeartRadio. So audio, another way to tell that story. So, all right. I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Sharon Lane, I still think about the live investigation at the old YMCA in Illinois. That was excellent. Thank you. Yeah, that was another way to do it. We did live investigations. I haven't done one of those for a while, but again, haven't really been investigating all that much lately. So it's just because places have been kind of closed up and can't get to them. Of course, I just moved, so that was a lot of work. All right. I think that's gonna do it. Tom, it's terrible that we were all supposed to go all in, but now we have to wait. Yeah, it's Yeah, in June. That was this past weekend it was supposed to be. That got canceled. September, we went ahead and canceled that because we just don't know what the state of Illinois is going to say in September. So the best way to play it is just we'll do it next year. But we are working on a virtual Paracon. Yes. But Tom, I do want to talk with you and the guys about all, because it has to do with that project that I was talking about for here, buddy. And you know that I wanted to talk to you, Nick and Dustin, about that experience up there. So, in Mineral Springs. So we'll talk about that some more because that will happen. And yes, Tim's showing Haunted Road Roast. It helps you hunt ghosts. The box is over there. So they're all sealed up. But we'll have them out for next time. Betty Lang, you love the family picture, Mike. Beautiful. Thank you. So that was on my, totally off topic, but that was on my personal Facebook profile where I got to see my kids this weekend, which I don't get to a lot because they're grown. They're starting to get scattered across the country. But really surprised my son Chase happened to be in town through the Oklahoma City area over the weekend and made plans with my daughter and my youngest son to meet up for brunch. Her boyfriend came along. Didn't say anything about the fact that my middle son Chase was in town from Maryland out to Oklahoma, and they drive up and he's there. I was like, dude. So it was pretty cool. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap it up and get to the shout outs and all that fun stuff. Yeah, Tom, we'll talk once I get settled in. Because it will be a good project. I was really excited about it until all that stuff hit. So I want to thank Quarantine Ghost for moderating the chat, feeding me all the questions. I guess giving out cookies down there, right? We'll get to of course, the Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons: Tom McNicholas, B3 Aerospace, Pamela Queen, Joe Chandler, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, and David Yeisley. Thank you all very, very much for being Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. You too can be a Patreon patron. Patreon.com/Haunted Road Media. A behind the scenes at the new studio will be going up there. Should be tomorrow. So, all right. Let's go ahead and get to the participants tab here. So we have, Britt Fansler is in the house. There's Candy Orton. Christopher Stanton, thanks for joining us again. Alina the Fam, thank you as always. Grand old folks, I always appreciate the questions. Betty, Helen Espinoza, good to see you. Was Guha in here at all for either episode? I want to make sure she gets a shout out, as well as Diane Hilbert, Haunted Road Media's Fairy Queen. I know she's she's had some health issues lately, so I want to make sure she gets that. There's Robert Hanna and Sharon Lane. Thanks for joining us as always. Hammy Heitzman and Tom McNicholas. There's Tim Schoen and Tracy Christian. Thank you all very much. And scroll through here real quick to see if there's anybody else that may have been missed by the participants tab. I did see Adam Tillery in there earlier. There's Katie Palmer and Jennifer Bloomer. Did I say Victoria Monday? Yeah, see, there's Adam Tillery. Babs Bunny, thank you for the questions. And I think that is about it. All right, everybody. Oh, there's Ren Oak. Ren Oak has been lurking. All right. Awesome. So that is going to do it, guys. Who do we have up next week? Oh, I think Justin Brown is up next week, right? Where is that schedule? Yep, Justin Brown next week. So we've had him on before. Great guy. So they've been doing some amazing paranormal investigations, and their your camera work is like top notch. So and also Justin's really big on the tech side for paranormal equipment. So it's always really interesting to talk to Justin. He's not out here so much on the YouTube channel, but when we were broadcasting on the Facebook channel or the Facebook page, he would always come in with some amazing questions. So very knowledgeable guy. So check that next week. Right here at Edge of the Rabbit Hole. This is Beyond the Shadows. I'm Mike. You guys have a great night. Till next time.